Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 2 of Zach with an H. You had Steve Max. Mr. Simon says last week. We got Ben Stevens. He goes by Big Ten Ben. He is one of the most energetic conversations you can ever hope to have. Connected at SportsGrid last year. Back here again. Ben, a pleasure to reconnect and talk about your journey, your life, and who Ben Stevens is.
Zach, very glad to be here. Thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for having me on the show. Excited to talk all about how Big Ten Ben came to be, how I got to the wonderful SportsGrid network, all of that good stuff as well.
Yeah, so Ben, let's start here in the beginning. Young Ben Stevens, back living in Calabasas, California. What were the first inklings of professional aspirations that he had?
Yeah, so I actually wrote this on my Syracuse University application because that was a place that I had my heart set on going in sports broadcasting. And one of the first times I ever realized that this was something that I could do or that I wanted to do, I was either 9 or 10 years old at my friend Zach's house, but no H actually, just ZAC. And we were playing NBA Live, I think 2003 or 2004. And I would love to announce the games. I would just announce what we were doing while the video game was playing out, and we would mute the TV. And to this day, I don't know if Zach's mom was joking with me or not, or just, humoring my ego. But as she walked into the room where we were playing the video game and the announcers were muted and I was calling the play-by-play of the game, she walked in and goes, "Whoa, who's the announcer for that game? Is that Al Michaels?" And we were like, "No, Jody, that's me. I'm doing it." And she was like, "Wow, Ben, you have a true talent for it." I've asked her about that story a couple of times since that has happened here in recent years. And she always has maintained, whether she is playing out the bit to this point, that was very truthful, that she thought it sounded professional as she walked into the room where we were playing that video game. So that kind of was the first spark for me to be like, "Oh, this is fun," as I always wanted to be in sports. And Zach, when I realized I was not going to be the 6'5" starting shooting guard for the Los Angeles Lakers, I thought, what could I do with sports to maintain that passion and still work in this pseudo type of industry? So that's kind of the first spark, I guess you could say, for sports broadcasting.
And I love that because I can relate to that. I still do that now. I have not been able to stop. I think I was, honestly, I don't know how much I knew or how coherent I was, but when I was 6 or 7, that was the beginning, right? You're just hopping on. I'm listening to the volume too because I got to know when the ball goes out of bounds, right? You can't always trust the text on screen. And I'd go in the backyard and I would be the players and announce too, right? And it's very hard because when you get that joy right there, that's the beginning in saying, hey, this is fun. This is cool. How can I prep myself now to go do this? So you had this when you're young. You end up going to Syracuse. I could name off on 10, 11, 12 hands the number of successful broadcasting alums from Syracuse. But you arrive at Syracuse in the fall of 2012. How do you get started with trying to hit this goal once you're actually in?
Yeah, a very competitive school, a very competitive journalism school, and really just all the extracurriculars that you could do at SU. WAER is the one that is very noted. Bob Costa, Sean McDonough, Mike Tirico have all made their way through WAER. Ben Stevens did not, surprisingly enough, because I didn't necessarily want to get involved in play-by-play. And AAR always seemed like the track to call Syracuse football and men's basketball games, and that wasn't necessarily my goal. My dream job has always been and maintains to this day to be the host of College Game Day. I want to be more so pregame, postgame, halftime show coverage, kind of some of that in-studio work, but surrounding, obviously, the live events. And so I was more enamored with Citrus TV, a great extracurricular sports TV, even news organization that happens at Syracuse. One of the great things is it is putting all that you are learning in your broadcast classes into immediate practice. Sure, it's just, your local cable channel on the campus TV station, but still it was really, with a lot of people that were like-minded, everybody trying to make their way either through Syracuse Broadcasting School or trying to get their feet started in this industry. It was a lot of really talented folks that you were working around, even at your campus TV station, and it was highly competitive. I remember auditioning for our senior year, what was called On the Bench, OTB, was the Sports Center type show for Syracuse athletics. And it was a different set of 2 hosts every day for the week, Monday through Friday, of course. So 10 people in total, and there were more than 25 to 30, something in that ballpark, people that tried out to have one of these 10 spots. And a lot of it was, with how talented you were, how in command of being on air you could be, but also just how much time did you invest into Citrus TV throughout the years? What had you been involved in, all that stuff? And I was a little bit skeptical that I would get the job, just knowing that I had other interests at Syracuse while I was there too, trying to, live the normal college life. And sure enough, I got one of the spots, loved it even more. And it was a competitive, grueling type of college experience with a lot of like-minded people, but I think that pushes you and makes you better. So being at Syracuse, getting involved, of course, in the broadcast and digital journalism school, but also having those real life opportunities at SU was huge for my career.
And do you remember that first show that you did, how you felt, what you had for breakfast that day, and what was going through your minds when they said action and you were on Citrus TV for that first time?
I don't remember the show per se. I remember the tryout for On the Bench because I'd done some things throughout some of the other shows throughout my time. You weren't really on air as a freshman, but my sophomore and junior year being on air. I do remember the tryout, though, for On the Bench that happened prior to our final semester, I believe, or maybe it was the first semester, but I remember the tryout, and I remember the laughs that I got when there was a Syracuse lacrosse game that was like the demo for the highlight to call, and the intro shot of the crowd inside the dome was a mom holding her newborn, or at least young child, and I said something along the lines of everybody and their mother out to support Syracuse lacrosse. And I remember the chuckles within the studio, and you could kind of hear some of the crew behind the scenes. And I was like, okay, that was a good line. Maybe this is going to help me get that gig. I don't know if it was that line or whatnot, but I remember that being like, okay, I can do this. This is not bad, and kind of settling the butterflies a little bit.
And then we fast forward ahead today. Now for the last 3 years, I think it's been almost 4 now for you at SportsGrid. So what happens? And I know the journey. I've looked up the journey, but we'll tell everyone from scratch. What happens to go from tryout to On the Bench to Big Ten Ben on SportsGrid, national radio every day of the week? How do you get there?
A long and winding journey, Zach. So my first job out of college was actually a really great job in Omaha, Nebraska. I was a sports anchor and reporter at the local CBS affiliate in Omaha. And as is, kind of pushed into your brain as you're at Syracuse, still kind of a little bit behind the times, I think, with where digital media is, especially in sports and all the opportunities that you now have to kind of get your foot in the door at places and break into the industry. Back then, this is 2015, 2016, it was still, you got to start small. You got to go to a small affiliate in some small town around the country, spend 2-3 years there, then 2-3 years more in a mid-sized market, and then 2-3 years. And then hopefully by the time you're 35, you'll be in LA, New York, Chicago, Dallas, insert X. And so my first job out of college was in Omaha, which was a great job that kind of worked through some connections. There was a guy that had a partnership with Syracuse Scripps, which was the company that owned my affiliate and many local TV stations around the country, the same people that put on the spelling bee. He was there watching one of my broadcast classes my senior year, my second semester. I got in contact with him. The news director in Omaha at my station used to work with one of my professors at Syracuse. When they say network, they are really not joking when it comes to that. So my first job was in Omaha, spent 2 years there, had a lovely, lovely time, learned a ton. I moved out to Omaha, Nebraska without knowing a single person, but realized pretty quickly, Zach, that local TV in the format and the structure was a little bit outdated, not necessarily what I wanted to do. I'm, talking about things in the 10 p.m. newscast at 10:24 p.m. Central Time that have happened at 11 a.m., and being somebody on social media, I'm like, this is old news now by this point. So it felt a little bit restrictive, and I didn't love it. And so I learned pretty quickly on, okay, I don't love local TV. I'm probably not going to stay in this 2 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here type of format. So I actually moved to New York in September of 2018, was working my way, doing a couple of various jobs, calling games for the Big East Network. I was hosting a couple of podcasts, and I applied to a job for the Believe podcast network at the time. And they were like, what do you want to do? What do you want your theme of your show to be? And I was like, well, I grew up, but I got my feet wet in the broadcasting industry in Nebraska. And obviously Nebraska football is the biggest thing statewide from as far east as Omaha goes all the way out to the Colorado border. So I would really, kind of love to do Big Ten football and focus on the Big Ten, because I felt the passion and the traditions and the rivalries within the fan base was something that was so cool to me, even beyond my Syracuse ties. Like, Syracuse doesn't have the relationships from the ACC that a lot of, the Big Ten schools have together. So I was like, I'll do a Big Ten show. And from there, it led to another podcast with the Locked On Podcast Network around the Big Ten. And then with the help of my good friend Luke Lamble, who was one of my first friends at Syracuse, he was like, Big Ten Ben just rolls off the tongue. So I started to create that brand and kind of made my way through there. Very long story, even longer, to combine how I got to SportsGrid. One of my classmates at Syracuse, Ariel Epstein, who was doing great work at SportsGrid, now works for MLB Network, various other positions as well, incredibly talented, reached out to me in December of 2020, I believe it was, when Indiana football was having a great season, and left out of a New Year's Six Bowl. And I made a ranting social media video in my parents' backyard as I was home for the holidays in Calabasas, California. And it picked up some traction online. Ariel reached out to me about doing a guest spot for SportsGrid on Big Ten football. And from there, a guest spot became a weekly guest spot that became a couple of hosting opportunities on the SportsGrid network. And in May of 2021, so just a little bit over 3 years ago, started hosting the morning show that has seen a couple of evolutions, but has kind of led to my career here at SportsGrid.
And certainly, been something to watch. We connected a little over a year. I want to say it was last February, kind of at the heart of the basketball season. But you got that. And I was always wondering, about how that Nebraska thing. So I know you get a lot of these great, whether they're real or not, the truth. Some really exciting Nebraska conversations on the streets all over. So now I'm glad I have that information.
Yes.
And now, having been at SportsGrid for 3 years, right? Obviously, it's really, obviously it's more like 3.5 when you consider when you first got on, when you first got introduced. How has it evolved? And do you feel that today, compared to day one, you're really able to be and maybe this was true the whole time, you could be the fully authentic Big Ten Ben Stevens anytime you hop on? And if yes, how great is it to know that you wanted this when you were 9? We're here 20 years later, and you are literally, it's a cliche line, but it's factual, living the dream.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, and it's always perspective that I try to keep for myself, even, not just 9-year-old Ben or Syracuse Ben or, 24-year-old Ben in Omaha, Nebraska, when I was kind of struggling a little bit, figuring out what I wanted to do, what the next step was, kind of breaking this traditional path that I had figured I would be on for multiple years. And I look back on those times and I say to myself, I started hosting for SportsGrid, living in New York City, really full time at the age of 28. And would pinch myself at those times when I signed my first full-time agreement with the SportsGrid network, and saying, if you would have told that to 24-year-old Ben, if you would have told that to the guy that had to work part-time at J. Crew in New York City to make ends meet and make sure he could pay his too steep of rent while I was hosting podcasts and doing other various things, trying to keep my feet wet in sports media. If you would have told that Ben from 2 years ago, 4 years ago, let alone the guy from 15, 20 years ago, he would pinch you and say, you live in Manhattan, you live in the biggest city in the world, and you are doing exactly what you have always dreamed of doing. And so I always try to keep that outlook and perspective, because in the daily minutia of what this job is, of what any company is, there are some frustrations and all of that, but it always is important to remember that perspective. So SportsGrid has been fantastic for me. It has been a wonderful platform. It has been a very fun organization to be a part of, because although we have a broad national reach, one of my favorite things being from LA, or at least Southern California, my show each and every morning is on the Dodgers channel, Spectrum Sportsnet LA, which I was an intern at after my sophomore year of college. It's how my parents watch every day. And so that's very cool to me, those things like that. We have a broad national reach. And I think a name that has really kind of emerged in the last few years in sports media, certainly with the correlation in sports betting media. But it's still a group that in-house, I work with a lot of the same great talented people every day. And it feels kind of like a startup. And we've, seen the evolutions, and we've seen the trying times. And there's been a lot of hope, and there's been a lot of progress. And, you continue to hope to make those gains and have those growths as a network as well. So that's been a very fun part to be here and a present member of, where, as opposed to, other more traditional media networks, which I'm sure are great, you're kind of a cog in a machine. Here, I think I've been able to help craft kind of some of the content of what we do, of how things have been presented. I've been able to incorporate and come up with shows, and it's how we got College Football Today off the ground, which is my pride and joy. It's our Saturday pregame show, much akin to a college game day, a big noon kickoff, all of that good stuff. We have done a really good job with some of the premier programming that I wanted to play a part in. So it's been fantastic, 3 years, and hoping for many more.
And you talk about, I think the most important part there was a time where you say you're working at J. Crew to make ends meet. And I think in the sports industry as a whole, there's a lot of people that want the positions that you have and that Ariel has, as you mentioned. And there's so many people that some people get it right away. Some people get it later. So let's say, so let's say someone's in their mid-20s, living in a big city, big goal, do what they want, will be able to support themselves. What's your advice to somebody that wants to get involved in the sports industry in any capacity, who might be working part-time, but maybe they're getting those freelance reps to trying to land that job that makes them a little fish becoming a slightly larger trout?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. One of the things that I always have kind of prided myself on is, especially when I got to New York and did not have a job lined up, which was a scary thing, reaching out to everybody that I could think of, everybody in the proverbial Rolodex to send an email to, even if I got no reply. Hey, at least I sent an email. At least I did that. It's how I started calling games for the Big East Digital Network. I reached out randomly to a guy that I found on St. John's media page, a wonderful man by the name of KJ Hammond, who I haven't spoken to in many years, is doing very, very well, whether it's with St. John's or somewhere else in his career. And he took a shot on me, right? He was like, hey, we need somebody to call this women's volleyball game. Here's $125 if you can make your way up to Queens. And I'm like, $125, fantastic. And it was a great opportunity. And it was a very professional broadcast using the great talented staff they had at St. John's. A lot of college kids getting their experience in their media program, but it was still a very fun part to be involved with. And so I think a lot of it is kind of swallowing your pride a little bit. I never thought I would work as a part-time retail sales associate, as I was still trying to make my way into sports media at J. Crew, but that allowed me to be able to do the other things. And it was great life experience. And it's been a winding path where really, honestly, Zach, as it started, I was on like the picture perfect, crystal clear path. Syracuse, the prestigious school that it was, starting in Omaha, which for local TV markets is as big as it gets. And certainly when it comes to sports, there's not many better, smaller, mid-sized markets in the country than that of Omaha, Nebraska. And I was here kind of living my dream and took a detour from it, only to get back to now at least being a part of what I've always wanted to do and what my great passion is. So a lot of it is swallowing your pride, but never being able to stop yourself from reaching out, from sending that email that you think is dumb, because you never know what it's going to lead to, and you never know what those experiences are going to lead to as well. I mean, if it wasn't for the ranting video on social media about Indiana football, who knows if I ever get connected with Ariel again and ever get on the SportsGrid network to be where we are now. So you never know what is going to happen, which always sounds like a cliche and sounds like something you can easily pass over. You don't know how it's going to play out. All it takes is that one person. I say it to myself now, right? I say it to anybody that I talk to when I speak about where sports media is. But it is the truth of the situation that if you have the passion for it and you believe in your talent and you trust yourself that this is what you're best suited to do, you will find your way, whatever that looks like.
And to answer your question, the beauty of the era we live in versus back in 2015 when it might be harder, KJ Hammond is now the manager of game production and content operations at Overtime, which he's been at for almost 4 years and was his first stop post St. John's.
Look at that. If you speak to KJ ever, Zach, or this gets to KJ, sincerely thank you to you, because I wouldn't be where I sit today without the kindness of him and without the willingness of him to give me those opportunities. I'm sure for him at times he was like, hey, good, I got somebody to call this women's soccer game, this men's lacrosse game that we didn't have somebody originally scheduled for. But for me, it always felt like a premier event. And that's one thing I've always told friends, I've told family, I've told anybody that would listen. It's not the Super Bowl. It's not the NCAA tournament. It's not your biggest college football game on a Saturday. But in those moments, at a St. John's soccer game on a Friday night, at a volleyball match against Fairfield the following day, whatever it is, that moment feels incredibly significant for those players, for those coaches, and for the families that are watching on ESPN3 or whatever it was back in the day. It does feel special, and that was always something I really appreciated.
Definitely. And I also think, finishing up on the KJ note, that I think the beauty of the sports industry is, as I've learned myself since graduating college a couple years after you in 2018, is that when you really put the time in to reach out and have discussions with people, so many folks want to pay it forward. They want to make time for you. They want to make time for those that are interested. And I think while it's like that in many, many industries, I think the beauty of sports and sportscasters and analysts and reporters, they remember when they were you, when they were in that position. Maybe you weren't at your best. Maybe you were in a transition period, but you wanted this. What can I do? Who can I contact? And you notice there's just so many wonderful people in the industry that just want to be there to help. And I think that's the beauty of getting involved in sports.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very, very well said. I think a lot of people know that in sports media, like many professions, but especially in sports media, they're not posting job opportunities on LinkedIn quite often, right? To be this on-air host is not something that comes up in the same way that it would if you were in sales or in any other corporate job. And this is not a knock at that, but it's just a different way that this industry, that the media network works in general. So a lot of it is the contacts. A lot of it is the networking, that somebody takes a chance on you, and then you hope that you are able to make them look good with the chance they took on you, and then pay that forward for people down the line. So it's very much interconnected, and anybody that you have that you can contact, that you can connect with, that you can network with, you never know what it can lead to. Again, it's a super cliche. I remember people used to say that to me, and I was like, shut up. Like, come on. Like, I've heard that a billion times. And here I am saying the same things, because they do pay off. If you believe in yourself and if you are gracious for those opportunities, good things do end up coming your way.
And as we continue to move forward here, Ben, you talked about your audition going back a little bit, where it was everyone and their mom at the game. How important do you think it is, especially in this industry, with all the stuff that happens in the world outside of what you and I do? And there's always something bad somewhere going on. So how important is it when you're on to whether just keep the energy up and to infuse humor and be lively, just so that people that take the time to watch for that amount of time can feel like this is the most important thing, and this is where they can decompress and come listen to Ben Stevens giving his takes?
Yeah, I think that's really how I try to treat most of what I do. I never take myself too seriously on air. I am not the reason people are watching. I am the reason, and hopefully the vehicle, that I can deliver some of the enjoyment that I feel when I watch sports, the passion that I feel, the emotions that I feel, and I hope I can replicate that and share it out. I always say when we do our show, hey, we're not doing brain surgery here, right? We're not doing open heart surgery. This should be a fun environment for people to tune in to. Yes, we can be impassioned, and we can be serious, and we can have those strong takes. That's something that truly pulls at the heartstrings. And oftentimes, Zach, as you well know, there are moments in sports that encapsulate so much more outside of just the playing surface, what it could mean in society, a serious moment that happens in a sports league with a sports individual, whatever it might be, where you do need some more nuance, you do need some more context, and you do need to pay it more serious attention. But for the most part, if we're breaking down a game, it's not life or death. It's the enjoyment to escape all of those very serious things in sports. The reason I love sports, the reason I want to be involved in live events, to be around those big atmospheres, is because for a moment you lose who you are and you have the community experience that you feel. I never get mad when somebody from a fan base tweets at me if I share something that they feel is negligent to their fan base. I'm like, good, that's what fans do. Now, obviously, don't be vicious, don't be hateful in the words or the manners in which you speak, but that's what sports is, and that's what it should be. It should be that passion and pride behind it, and it should be all of the emotions that make you feel the way you do about sports, where something like a game and who wins a baseball game 3-2, or who wins a football game in week 7 of the college football season, it might not seem overly significant. It might not seem like it matters, but to individuals, it does. And that's something that I really take pride in, and that I hope to always have the understanding for, that what I am doing is not about me. It's about to replicate those feelings of joy and excitement that I've always felt watching, consuming, and being a part of sports, to others out there. If I can do that, then I consider myself a success.
And one word to encapsulate the whole sports experience to me, and how I've grown up and how you grew up and how millions and billions of people throughout the annals of history: nostalgia. Where were you when you watched the game? What were you listening to? Who was on the call? Who was with you? What were you eating? When was it? What was happening in your life at that time? Like music, like books you read, and like anything else you track, right? We think back, what was it like when that happens? And I think that when we look back and we have our discussions too, you remember that next day, what was Ben Stevens saying about Nebraska's undefeated season under Matt Rule that shocks the entire universe? What was happening when the Vikings debuted their new jerseys today and they looked pretty fire? What was happening when the Lakers suddenly said, we want Dan Hurley, and shocked everybody because that wasn't even in the news until we all woke up and found out this morning at 4 o'clock PST.
Yeah.
So, right, nostalgia is what encapsulates it all, and I think it's what drives us all forward to stay and get involved. Because when we look back in history, it doesn't matter if it's our voice that's being heard or whose voice it was that the moment happened. It's how we felt watching it, and it's how we remember it, and that's the beauty of these discussions.
Yeah, absolutely so. Couldn't honestly put it better myself. It is all of why I love college sports a little bit more than professional sports, because I feel those kindred ties to your school, to your fan base, to your community can mean just a little bit more because of how passionate the things are, because of how storied traditions can be. In college sports, as we know, is an emerging and changing landscape. But that pageantry and the history and the nostalgia behind it all is why I certainly gravitate towards college sports. But I know that's, obviously felt in the professional ranks, and rightfully so as well. It's the moments that you remember forever that are, flashbulb memories in your mind. And a lot of times sports can be the reason that those memories exist.
And I couldn't say that better myself. And Ben, as we continue, best part of the show, second annual. It's the second episode, so it's the second time running. So we got the rapid fire round. We're going to get to know Ben Stevens and his favorite things. You ready for this?
Fire away.
All right. Favorite book. Could be novel, could be nonfiction, but one book that you remember best.
What is it? Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close is my favorite book of all time. It was turned into a movie that starred Tom Hanks. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. Can't remember the author at the moment. I do apologize. But speaking of emotions and things that made you feel, that was a book that I read, I think, during high school. It's about a kid who sadly loses his father in the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City. And he pretty much goes on an adventure to figure out something that he thinks his father left him, a key, and how he kind of a coming of age story with his grandfather and all that good stuff. So it's a beautiful book. Truly makes you feel both joy, agony all at once. And I really enjoyed it.
And not to butcher the pronunciation, Jonathan Safran Foer. I don't know if that's correct.
It is. It sounds familiar. Yes, I believe you are correct.
I will read and watch and get back to you with that. So I'm just the big goal. I'm making this whole list. I learned something from everybody, then I read what they like, and so on and so forth. Okay, perfect. All right. Favorite movie?
It's a cliche, but it's always been Remember the Titans is my number one movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember them indeed. TV show.
Ooh, favorite TV show of all time. I'm watching The Sopranos right now. It's certainly rising in the ranks. First time watching The Sopranos in season 6 at the moment, so no spoilers, please. But as of right now, before I complete The Sopranos and have to readjust, it's Peaky Blinders. That's my favorite show of all time. Yeah.
Shout out Cillian Murphy. Okay.
Amen.
Favorite food to cook? Chef Ben. What's he making? What's his favorite thing to make?
Turkey tacos. It is a Stevens family tradition. My father has made them pretty much every single Friday night for the last 35 to 40 years. It is a secret family recipe that has been shared down by me. And Zach, frankly, that's all I can say about the recipe. But I don't make them nearly as good as my father, but I hope to continue the tradition.
Respect. All right. Your favorite food to order out?
Favorite food to order out? I've been really getting into Greek lately. Love some Mediterranean. Love me some pita. Love me some tzatziki, labna, hummus, all that good stuff. Some really great Greek food in New York City. There's a place not far from my apartment called Pylos that does fantastic work.
And then my only follow-up for you there, are you more platter or sandwich?
I'm actually more like a platter. I like rice, chicken, the vegetables, and all that in one. I like to take my fork into a bowl and just go all through it. I feel like you get more bang for your buck that way, even if it's not true.
No, I'm with that. I do think it's funny. I see the sandwich is actually costing less, but I'm definitely a platter guy. And I'll go Mexican. I'm going bowl 80% of the time over burrito in that in that same breath. Okay,
love a good burrito, but I lean burrito bowl.
Absolutely. The bowl lets you assemble it how you want, and then you get the side of chips, and you can just make the chips. You're almost getting free nachos almost out of the bowl.
Veteran move, Zach, out of you. Veteran move.
Took me a long time. All right. I don't know if you can answer this one directly, since obviously you work in the industry, but do you have a favorite sports team that you could openly say, that's my squad?
Yeah, so growing up, I was a huge Lakers fan in the Shaq and Kobe era of the LA Lakers, and then Kobe and Powell and Lamar and all that good stuff. I'm not so much a Lakers fan anymore because, well, one, I don't live in Los Angeles and haven't lived in Los Angeles in a long time. And I spent the good majority of my days growing up of adolescence arguing that LeBron James was worse than Kobe Bryant, something I don't still argue to this day. So the fact that LeBron's in the Lakers is not like my favorite thing. I don't feel that like tied to him. Yeah. I was a huge Chiefs fan growing up because of Priest Holmes, and there was no teams in LA when I was growing up. My parents weren't fans of the teams that left. That's starting to dwindle just a little bit. I still will always say, Zach, and this is the way that I put it, if I could see any team win a national championship, win a title of sorts, it would be Syracuse men's basketball. If I can see the Syracuse Orange win a national championship sometime in my lifetime, I will cry. I know that. So I'll go with Syracuse men's basketball.
All right. I think we'd all have to see that emotion from you as well, should that happen. All right. We got two more. Favorite random hobby. Random to that someone who knows you and would have no idea that you like to do this.
Ooh, random hobby. I guess golf is probably not that random if you know me. Love to play some golf. What else? Yeah, I guess I'll stick with golf. I'll stick with golf.
Very random. Love to play.
Love to play some golf, Zach. Love to play some golf. Anytime that I can. I wish it was more accessible in the greater New York City area, but I'll go with golf.
And now you going to New Jersey, Connecticut, or upstate New York when you're mostly golfing? That's my follow-up for you.
Yeah, I go mostly to New Jersey because one of my good friends lives in Jersey City, and the path to get out there is not terribly tough to do, and he has a car, so he can drive us all over the Great Garden State. So that's probably the most feasible path of me hitting the links.
Okay, and the last question here for you, and then we'll wrap up. Do you still broadcast your video games?
I do not broadcast my video games anymore. I should, but no, I do not. Maybe that will change when College Football 25 comes out in just about a month and a half. So no, I do not broadcast my video games anymore. Don't play a lot of video games for what it's worth, but that might change in about 6 weeks.
All right. Well, good luck to you on that. I do hope that we get an on-air segment on SportsGrid of you just getting into it and talking about your franchise with that new small school that went from D3 to D1 and then somehow won the title, skipping all the regulations needed when it comes to changing divisions.
Amen. I'm bringing Kent State to the college football playoff. That's all I know.
Let's go. Yeah. Flashes, right? No, the Owls?
Yeah. No, the Golden Flashes. You are correct. Yeah, my girlfriend went to Kent State. So I'm a pseudo-Maction guy, and Kent State's going to be the team that I build the dynasty with.
All right. You heard it here first, folks. We got the scoop. The world doesn't know yet, right? This is the first announcement?
I think I've alluded to it in a tweet before that I mentioned that I would make Kent State a great dynasty, but not the reasoning why. So the Golden Flashes are on the come up in Ben Stevens' version of College Football 25.
All right. And now, Ben, as we wrap up, where can folks find the work and the life of Ben Stevens?
It is mostly on SportsGrid Network, which is all over the place, Sirius XM channel 159. If you have a smart TV, there's an over-the-top channel there right for you. It's on different cable areas. Sometimes, Zach, people send me screenshots walking by a TV or in their gym, and they're like, hey, you're on. And I'm always like, how did I get there? Do you know what your gym did to put us on the TV? So that's mostly where things live. And I guess at Ben Scott Stevens on Twitter as well, where I try to keep things fun for the most part.
Absolutely, he does. He's Ben Stevens. I'm Zach Weiss, also known as Zach with an H. Shout out Sammy Whitcomb, NY Liberty legend, now Seattle Storm. Yes, that was what the shirt was. Been waiting to to pull that, but
Heck
we
yeah.
will see you next time, folks. On Zach with an H, we have Carter Wilson. He is an author. We're starting The New Neighbor later this evening, and we look forward to having his work on. Until next time, we'll see you later.